Everybody remembers their first wave, whether it be in the ocean, their first break in business, or their first big win. I'm David McClymont, a former competitive surfer now turned C-suite executive leading the Palm Beach Symphony into its 48th season and your host on the Waves of Success podcast.
This show is brought to you by IYC Yachts, Chervaux, and Square Grouper.
Hey everybody, I'm David McClymont and welcome to Waves of Success. I am thrilled to have a good friend, Lou Shapiro, with us today for today's episode, who is president and CEO of HSS, Hospital for Special Surgery. Lou, thank you so much for being with me.
Thank you for having me.
It's my pleasure. I look forward to spending the next 20 or 30 minutes talking about life, talking about business, talking about you establishing a new location, which is coming up. We just talked offline on the second anniversary with HSS down here.
Definitely. Yeah, Monday will be 2 years.
Monday will be 2 years.
Yeah.
Time flies, doesn't it?
Lots happened since then.
It sure has. And we'll talk a little bit about that. We had the opportunity to do a performance for the ribbon cutting there. And I think you're really starting to establish yourselves in the market here. Talk a little bit about why Florida. You know, obviously HSS is number one in the world in the orthopedic space. Is that correct?
Yep.
And why Florida?
Yeah.
Why Palm Beach County?
Yeah, so I started at HSS 15 years ago. And I don't know if it was my first day, but certainly the first couple of weeks, people said, we need to go to Florida. I was like, why? They said, well, because a lot of people from New York spend time in Florida, and there's an opportunity to bring what we do to that market, where people value their lifestyle and value their mobility, and we shouldn't require people to travel to New York to receive that level of care. So it seemed like a good idea at the time. So we started looking at it, and one of the things that we tend to grow very slowly because we're very protective of the brand. And we were trying to figure out, okay, if we go there, what we do in Florida needs to be of the same quality that we have in New York. So it took us a long time to figure out how to do that. And we finally, 2017, it was approved by the board to come down, and we started construction, opened 2 years ago. And, we did all that before it was in vogue to come down to Palm Beach and leave the big city. So we're very happy with what we've accomplished in 2 years. Feel very good about the people that have joined the team. They represent the brand proudly. I think in 2 years we've done something that people thought we wouldn't be able to do, which is replicate the brand, the culture, the caliber of care, the compassion in which it's delivered, and the outcome people expect when they come there. We have a lot more work to do. We will continue to grow significantly in the years ahead, but I think we're off to a good start.
So a lot of what we discuss on this show are business strategies, how people and organizations cut their wave to success. I'm a firm believer that there's 3 Ps in business. My 3 Ps are people, process, and product. You've just touched upon 2 of those. So talk about how you were able to replicate coming from New York, having the people, the processes, and the product up there, and then establishing that down here, because culture plays a very big part, as you and I have discussed many times, with the success of organizations. So how were you able to replicate that down in a new market?
Yeah. So if you just look back on how we've grown in New York, we've grown tenfold in a decade, maybe not quite that much, but a significant order of magnitude increase in the same location and in different locations. Yeah, Florida's a little different because there's 1,000 miles in between, but I think there's a number of factors that I think are relevant to any organization. If it really, I think most organizations care about culture. But I tend to believe that, culture is it's almost like a secret ingredient if you really pay attention to it, and it's really important to you, and you just don't give it lip service, and you figure out a way to make it part of the DNA of the organization. Then whatever organization does that can achieve a level of performance that's otherwise unattainable. And that has to do with that has to do with many things, but foundationally it's about creating an environment where the people who are there feel excited to be there. They feel that they're part of the purpose of the organization. And regardless of what they do in their job, they sort of feel like they're a leader of the organization, almost like they own the place. That's how they behave. And if you recruit people who have that sort of predisposition, if you recruit, obviously they have to be skilled, but you really recruit for attitude. And if you can create the environment that allows that to occur, then organizations can soar. HSS in particular, we're obviously a healthcare organization. We take care of people who have a certain type of problem. In our case, it's musculoskeletal problems, orthopedics, rheumatology, other things that impact your ability to move. So at the core of that is we have to recruit talent. So while we're a healthcare organization, in many ways we're a talent organization, just attracting talent and then giving them the environment to do their job and making sure that it's the best possible place for that particular job, and then creating the culture that allows them to perform. And that's whether we're expanding to Connecticut or New Jersey or Florida, it's the same exact approach. Like, we know how to do orthopedics. We have protocols and how to move patients through the system, how to register them, how to make sure infection rates are low. Those are all sort of like process management things that are transportable. But recruiting talent, how you bring them into the organization, the environment that you have for them to work is, it's an art, but it's also a science, if you believe it's important.
Mm-hmm. Well, it reminds me of two great books, Good to Great, which I think you and I have talked about, with Jim Collins, and you just touched upon that. So in the book, they talk about getting all the right people on the bus, but then more importantly, having them seated in the right position. But then the second book that I love is The Nordstrom Way. And they asked Mr. Nordstrom in The Nordstrom Way, how did you build this massive organization, Nordstrom's? He said, it's very simple. I hire the smile. So it goes back to what you said. I think we as leaders do find the right people. Obviously, there does have to be a strain of talent, but if you have the right attitude, the right disposition, the right work ethic, what does leadership by all mean? I know you have a philosophy of leadership by all, so that's probably a pretty good segue into the culture of what I like to call empowerment. I love to follow the Gallup organization. I don't know if you follow the Gallup organization or if you've used the Q12, the 12 questions. One of the 12 questions that they ask in the Q12 is, are we as an organization providing you with the tools to be successful? So talk a little bit about leadership by all.
So there's a lot of things that are synonymous with each other. So we use different words to describe the same thing. Culture, as I described, you're creating an environment where people feel that they can be the best they can be and are contributing to the purpose. The one way you create that environment is to make sure you have an engaged workforce. And we've been doing Gallup for 15 years, and that's how we measure it, because you manage what you measure. And you can't measure everything exactly the way you want, but that's a way we measure it. We do it every year. 15 years ago, our ratio was something like 1.9 to 1, 1.9 being engaged for every one disengaged. That's not great. Gallup says the tipping point where the power of the engaged actually drives organizational performance is 4 to 1. And the last survey we did was pre-pandemic, and we were like over 7 to So employee engagement is another way. And then, leadership by all is really encompassing the same thing. Everyone's a leader, regardless of your role. So when we have new people come on board and I meet with them, and 90 days later, but I meet with them again. And then every month when I meet with subset of the organization, we talk about, the foundational elements of what makes HSS, our purpose, why we exist, our values that fuel our purpose, our roadmap, how are we getting from where we are to where we want to go, and then the leadership philosophy, leadership by all, everyone's a leader regardless of your role. So you figure that out. So what does that mean to you? How do you contribute to fulfilling our purpose? How do you live our values? We got 1,000 things we need to do to accomplish our aspirations and our purpose. You have a role in each one of those things occurring. Now, you can't just say that. You got to create the environment and all the management systems to make that real. Because if you say something and don't follow up with it being reality, then what you end up with is a cynical organization, and you will not accomplish your goals. You won't be successful. You'll fail. So there's only two choices. You either win or you lose. And winning to HSS is fulfilling our purpose, which is helping people get back to what they need and love to do better than any place in the world, period. So we either do that or we not, or we don't. And it goes back to the things we talked about, recruiting the very best, giving them what they need to do their job, creating a great environment, and making sure everyone's on the same team.
Mm-hmm. So obviously accountability would be very important with all of that too. Ownership, accountability, them feeling like they're owners, as you said, they're key stakeholders in the business, and they're part of the decision-making process, which is very important in all of that. Let's talk about the pandemic. I found it very fascinating when I had the pleasure of going up and visiting your incredible facility that's vast up in New York. And I met with your colleague, John Englehart, took a tour. You had to pivot, as all of us did. We had to at the Palm Beach Symphony. Talk a little bit about how you pivoted both in the beginning of the pandemic and then working through the pandemic to reorganize your processes to be able to facilitate the needs during those times. I found that very fascinating when I took that tour.
Yeah. So, as you were asking me that question, I sort of felt the goosebumps or shivers from remembering those days. So, HSS is, we're a specialized academic medical center, right? We take care of patients with musculoskeletal problems. I remember it was February, and we heard about this thing that was going on. It was in Seattle. We're like, okay, doesn't sound good. We need to start doing some things. So we started thinking about how we restrict travel, make sure people weren't going to meetings. And then as we got into the end of February, early March, we were thinking about how we restrict who comes in for care, because we knew that was coming down the road. So we defined what is elective versus emergent. And we started shifting. And then I think it was probably like March 8th or something like that. We said, okay, we need to open up for non-musculoskeletal patients to help alleviate the burden at other hospitals that were taking COVID patients. So stroke, burn, drug and alcohol, and I forget the fourth patient. Those were our first 4 non-orthopedic patients. And it was like the third week in March. And then things were obviously really bad in New York, and we were, everyone was frightened, and we said what we were doing wasn't enough. So we said, okay, we're going to turn ourselves into a COVID hospital. So we, over the second half of March, we went, and we're about a $2 billion revenue organization. We went from 100%, full speed, to 8%, 100 to 8 overnight. not overnight, in 3 days. And then we converted our facilities. Our operating rooms became ICUs. Our anesthesia machines became ventilators. Our physical therapists who help people recover from ACL surgery or joint replacements were proning patients in bed. Our anesthesiologists who take care of, trained to take care of critically ill patients were sort of, and our internist became the top of the pyramid, directing everything. And, our orthopedic surgeons who made HSS famous just pitched in and helped. And we did that as long as the city needed us to do that. In March, April, May, so we went over the first hump, and then we started reducing that. Then over the rest of 2020, we started turning the former version of HSS back on, and it's been up and down. You had the first wave, you had the tsunami that hit New York City, and then you had Delta, and then you had Omicron. But we're back. We're back at 100% of what we were before 2019. Like every organization, like every human being in every organization of any size or shape, you still feel the effects of the past and the present. But pivoting is something we've become accustomed to. But at the same time, you have to recognize that, regardless of what people say or how they behave, people have gone through a lot of stress, and they at home, at work, and you have to recognize that and make sure that people are healthy and you're taking care of them.
So speaking of processes, if you reflect back, what were some of the key takeaways that you learned going through that experience that now you can apply to the normal business model in terms of the services that you provide?
We spent a lot of time on that. We added, and obviously there was a lot of other things that went on over the course of the last 2 years. So as I said before, we're a purpose-driven organization. Our purpose is fueled by our values. So if you don't live your values, you can't achieve your purpose. So we added 2 new values that have should have been values. They should have been stated values before. Value of diversity and gratitude. Right. Go through that. You just have to be grateful to everyone for everything, and it has to be genuine. So you're building. So we learned about that, and have brought that through to today and forever. I learned that you can make decisions much faster than we do. So figure out how to get rid of the bureaucracy that impedes an organization from making progress. Even if you have pride that you're not bureaucratic, you can make decisions much faster. So we've tried to bring that through. That's hard. And then in many ways, I think the only reason why we're able to do what we did is because of the culture that we had before. If we didn't have what we had before, we wouldn't have been able to do what we did.
That was the foundation.
So we learned in a way how important that was. You can't go from an orthopedic hospital taking care of people who have spine surgery and joint replacements and turn yourself into a COVID hospital overnight. It's just not done. So we were only able to do it because of the characteristics of the organization before, I think.
So you and I have talked about data. I think I actually sent you one of my favorite books, Measure What Matters by John Doerr. How do you use data to help guide the organization without getting stuck in the trenches of what I like to call analysis paralysis, right? Because us as leaders, CEOs, trying to create strategic visioning for the organization can be sometimes difficult to get caught up in the data. So how are you using data to manage HSS?
We have a lot of data.
And I know you're very data driven, so I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about that.
In my office, I have a big TV screen that has a digital dashboard on it that gives me sort of a view of what's happening in the organization over time and today. I mean, you manage what you measure, so how would you know? And it's all in one place. And that sort of exists throughout, so people have information so they can measure whatever it is that we manage. We have goals. You mentioned employee engagement, right? So how do you know if you have a good culture unless you measure it? So we have data on that. And then we have goals that we want to achieve, and they cascade through the organization. They could be financial or strategic, inequality. And we have data on all those things that help us measure it. We monitor over 300 different quality things. You have to have data on that. And then we have, because we're specialized and given our size, we do more orthopedic, musculoskeletal care than any place in the world. And we have data on all that. And it used to exist in places where you couldn't access it. So we created this thing that we call the Center for Analytics, Modeling, and Performance, and began to organize the data and data warehouses and data lakes, all the sophisticated things that you would imagine that any organization who's with the times would be somewhere in their journey of having, whether it's in the cloud or on their own servers, whatever. So you can apply machine learning and artificial intelligence to it, so you can learn how to get better. But I'm sure we have many, many examples where we spend way too much time looking at analyses for it. But we tend to feel that we need to move fast, and we want to make good decisions, not bad decisions. So I think we just try to, we don't spend a lot of time worrying about that. Maybe we should. But we have lots of data. But at the same time, we do make decisions quickly and move pretty quick. I mean, look, we entered the Florida market, although it did take us many years to make that decision and get here.
Well, I tend to agree with you. I think one of the things that we've learned at my organization is exactly what you just said, is I think COVID taught us how to make decisions very quickly and to be a lot more comfortable with pivoting, obviously using data to be able to support those decisions. Let's shift gears and talk a little bit about work-life balance. What are some of the things that you like to do that create happiness for you outside of the work?
I love my job. I love my family. I love spending time with them. And it's, it's like, I love the weekends, and I'm excited for Monday to roll around to come to work, because we're doing important stuff. But I'm not that exciting. Right? So spend time with my family, spend time at work. I like to play golf, travel a little bit. I do believe in work-life balance, and encourage / require that or support that. I may not be a great role model. Not sure about that.
I can relate to that. I'm the same. I love my job. I love what I do.
Yeah,
I'm very passionate about it.
It's fun. It's not really.
And I've often said that Oprah said many years ago, if you find a passion, figure out a way to get paid for it, you never work another day in your life. And that's sort of where I feel like I am. And I know that you're very passionate about what you do. So we enjoy what we do.
Yeah.
But I know that you're a Steelers fan, right? We won't hold that against you. Being that I'm a big Dolphins fan, although Danny did come from your town.
He did.
Right?
He did.
I know.
He did.
We're sort of holding on to him.
I think he retired.
He did. But there's like this lore of, can we bring him back?
Yeah.
Although Tua's trying to make his mark. So talk a little bit about the Steelers. What do you think is going to happen next year?
Well, it's interesting. Sometimes I'll use analogies. There's a athletic team, whether it's football or baseball. It's it's an organization that has people in it, has a culture, right? You recruit talent. The difference is, football's a game, and we're obviously dealing with people's lives, so you can't. It's not a great analogy, but Pittsburgh's a great family-oriented team. The ownership is committed to people in the organization and committed to the city, and they just need to continue to recruit talent. I mean, this is obviously a big year with Ben retiring, so that's a big one.
Well, I like what you said too about organizations, because it's very similar in terms of you have a very talented individual that's within the corporate structure that leaves. You have to have some type of a succession plan. So I'm sure that Pittsburgh spent quite a bit of time making sure.
I mean, there's a lot of teams that, dynasty teams that just keep on winning, and even winning with successive changes in rosters. There's a lot of organizations out there that measure other organizations. They're in the measurement business, and they're in that business for a variety of reasons. So U.S. News is in the measurement business: best colleges, best cities, maybe best symphonies, also best hospitals. So we've been, and they do that to help consumers make decisions. So we've been ranked number one by U.S. News and World Report as the number one orthopedic hospital in the country for 12 consecutive years. Newsweek also got into that business, not quite as data driven. They it's more of a reputational survey. They survey professionals in that field, but it's a global survey. They've been doing it for 2 years. So we've been ranked number one in the world for both years they've been doing the survey. And I think it just goes back to what we talked about before: recruiting talent, giving them what they need to do their job, creating a culture that allows the organization to perform at a level that it couldn't without that culture. And then you have data so you can improve on what you do. And then the results happen. It's not chasing number one. It's just continuing to focus on how do you get better? No matter what you've accomplished, doesn't matter. How do you get better?
Well, I forget which coach it was and which sport it was, but that's some professional coach talked about, we're not focused on the scoreboard, we're focused on the next play. And I think a lot of that also could be applied towards business too, in terms of, focusing on just doing the right thing with that right next step.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about this area. So you've established HSS here in Palm Beach County. You've got a beautiful location right there on Palm Beach Lakes Boulevard that I've been to. Stunning. For those people that are listening to the Waves of Success podcast, talk to the audience a little bit about what separates you from HSS. What is your competitive advantage, your differentiating value proposition? What makes you unique as to why somebody would go to HSS versus any other orthopedic organization in Palm Beach County?
So I think that people should receive care wherever they want, as long as they're making an informed decision about their care. They should go wherever they want. I generally believe that if people know about us and do research, you talk to people, they'll make an informed decision to come to us. If they make an informed decision and go somewhere else, that's fine. Right? I mean, people have to take care of themselves however they choose to. But what we've done here is no different than what we did in New York. It's just, I feel like I'm repeating myself. It's the same thing. Recruiting talent, people who are the best in the field at what they do. Anyone that joins the team here, we would have recruited to New York. No question. Recruiting the very best people, giving them what they need to do their job, creating a work environment that allows people to be, all in. And so we didn't do anything differently here than we did in New York. So it's HSS Florida is the same as HSS New York, is the same as HSS Connecticut, or wherever we are.
I want to thank you for being on the show, Lou. It's been a pleasure. Enjoy your golf tomorrow. I understand you're playing golf tomorrow. You have 36 holes tomorrow, I think.
I do.
Right? So enjoy that.
Thank you.
The weather should be
excited.
perfect. Today's, I guess, 78 compared to 40 up in New York. So
perfect.
It should be a nice day.
It doesn't even matter where the ball goes.
No, it doesn't. Just being out there.
Yeah.
So thanks for being on Waves of Success. I want to really thank you very much for being a part of the show.
Thank you. Thank you for everything that you did
pleasure.
For Florida.
Absolutely. My pleasure.
Great.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tuning in today to Waves of Success. We'll look forward to catching you next time when you ride your wave to success. Thank you very much.
If you've enjoyed this episode of Waves of Success, don't forget to like, follow, subscribe, and share. We'd like to thank our sponsors, IYC Yachts, Chervaux, and Square Grouper.